I'm Ryan. I'm the CEO of Collapse Survivor. This was our seventh simulation, and it was a very different one than the usual ones we have. Spoiler alert for those who have not played the scenarios, you will probably want to do so before you listen to this podcast.
And I'm Drew Miller. I'm the CEO of Fortitude Ranch and a survival expert consultant to the Collapse Survivor app.
And so this wasn't a typical scenario of things steadily getting worse as the simulation moves on. It was just the opposite. It was announcement of a surprise huge incoming asteroids. You only got 3 weeks to live before impact that will yield an impact winner of blocked sunlight for many years. A lot of crop failures, a lot of issues, extensions of the species on Earth, and death for probably 99% of humans. What happened during the 6-day simulation was largely reflecting what you would do if you had 3 weeks left to live. You probably have tried to stockpile food for 10 to 15 years, and our survival expert, Colonel Miller, will discuss this extremely difficult mission. But for most of the players, this simulation was largely thinking about what you would do with 3 weeks left with a death sentence. So, what would you do if you had 3 weeks left to live and you knew about it? What would you do? We were going to deep dive into to some very dark survival topic. What would you do if you were facing starvation and not able to keep all of your group alive? There was a lot of humor, some amusing things in the scenario, including Elon Musk, SpaceX, Race for Mars. As you likely know, the Earth has been pounded by asteroids over its billions of years of existence, and we still have small asteroids and comets from time to time. Asteroids are made of metals and rocky material, while comets are made of ice, dust, and rocky material.
Scientists believe that we've had at least five major mass extinction events on Earth, many caused by asteroids and supervolcanoes. The kill mechanism in both cases is not really the initial impact or explosion, though that'll definitely kill you if you're close. The big killing mechanism is the debris and the smoke that gets thrown up high into the atmosphere, and that stays there for a long time, years, maybe a decade plus, blocking the sun and plant life, so plant life and wildlife dies off.
So, species going extinct happen at a relatively low rate all the time. Extinctions are normal, literally just part of evolution. The estimate I've seen that this historically has been 10% of species that are lost every million years, 30% every 10 million years.
Yeah. Although right now, with all the polluting that mankind is doing, I think the extinction rate for species is definitely up. But mass extinction events like the one in this scenario involves most species going extinct in a relatively short span of years.
This was not a normal collapse survival simulation where you were making survival decisions, struggling to survive, often starving to death and fending off marauder attacks. In this case, you got a death sentence up front. A huge asteroid will destroy the planet. It will kill a majority of the plants and wildlife, including humans, in 3 weeks. While we discuss some real survival choices you could make if you wanted to try and survive for a decade without plant growth, for the vast majority of players in this, it was more a philosophical exercise. What would you do with the remaining time on Earth? For most, the answer to this question is what would you do if you had a week left to live? Was just they would enjoy time with their family and loved ones. 51%. Yeah, just over 51. 20% would race to get as many item lists done as possible in their last week. But in the scenario with no one working, a lot of touristy things to do, things requiring travel, it would be impossible. 14% focus on prayer and their religious beliefs. So in this simulation, we hope you did take some time to consider the course you're on right now with your life, if you really are pursuing the right priorities. As recommended in one of these message traffic items, this might be a good thing to discuss with your spouse and family. So as the message traffic in this simulation explained, if a big asteroid strikes, it throws up so much smoke and debris into the air that it could block out sunlight for years, or perhaps over a decade. The temperatures on Earth would plunge, and most plant life and wildlife would die out.
The good news is that it is a solution to global warming.
Yeah, but but a costly one. So some people in the simulation tried to gather enough food to survive, and in this message item on the right, Some were planning to throttle down their activity and calorie intake, so just 1,000 calories per day to survive.
Yeah, as most of you probably know, the magic number of calories is normally about 2,000 a day for men, a little bit less for adult women. And you could go down to 1,500 calories a day for the vast majority of people, and you'd not just survive. For your health might actually improve for a lot of people, since for Americans at least, most of us are a bit overweight, so losing weight actually can improve your health. But 1,000 calories a day, and you're probably going to have some physical damage, especially if you're trying to do this for years. So you could survive an impact winter if you had a decade plus of stored shelf stable food. And that is just not what even the most hardcore preppers do. They are lucky to have a year. Two would even be probably unusual for most. And of course, you have to have the ability to protect it from the 99% of the rest of the population starving to death, who will come after you if you've got food. Now, if you're a top government official, suspect that there probably may be this level of food stored at Mount Weather, though perhaps they may not even store 10 years of food. I don't know. But as you saw in this simulation, locals actually took over the FEMA government survival facility at both Mount Winter and Site R or Raven Rock in Pennsylvania. A lot of citizens think it's immoral, repugnant for government officials to be using our tax dollars to equip and pay for survival facilities for themselves while they do nothing for the rest of us. Some people will attempt to do very aggressive marauding and build up years of shelf stable food if they were in a situation like this. But you would have to be a pretty big marauder group to do this, because you're both sending out marauders to attack and steal the food, plus you got to guard your stockpile base, or you're trying to build up a decade of food. So you'd have to collect a lot of food, and I just don't see this as very feasible. So growing indoor plants seems like a good idea. Probably be doing this underground, and it seems like a good plan, but this again would be just very, very extremely hard to do. Let's assume you've got 10 years of seed, or you've got heirloom plants and you can save the seeds and replant. The big problem is your energy source to go that long, producing your own sunlight. If you had a nuclear reactor and all the staff for that, that could run for a long time. But again, that's a lot of people and just not very likely. While sunlight may be largely blocked, there may be enough for some solar power. We're just not sure about this. Haven't seen studies on things like this. But it'd be hard to estimate if that'd be feasible to do. Wind generators, you would think, would work, but again, the sun is the source of almost all power on Earth, including wind, and you'd have less wind with less sunlight down here. And the big problem we've always found with wind generators is just they don't last that long. We're testing a vertical wind generator now at a Fortitude Ranch that may be reliable, but for 10 years, I would think that'd be doubtful. You could gather firewood and have wood stoves, running for heat and cooking for a decade. But unless there's a good wood gasification electric generator that gets manufactured, that's just not a source of electric energy for grow lights. Growing mushrooms in the dark might seem like a good idea, but mushrooms are low calorie, and that's the opposite of what you need for survival food. There are going to be bugs that are going to feast on all the dead plant life and wildlife, and bugs are generally a fantastic survival food, good protein and calories. So overall, in point 7 here on the slide, we kind of summarize the best course of action for you here. Still not good odds for you, but probably the best you can do. And that would be to gather as much grass feed for farm animals like rabbits as you can in the time you've got. Shoot and poach anything that's edible, make jerky out of it to make it last longer. Definitely want to be gathering bugs, and over time figure out, maybe better ways to get them. And you may have to end up, digging to get bugs that are feasting on dead plant life and wildlife. You want to look for creatures that can survive the impact winter to eat. Creatures evolve. Some species will survive based on what we've seen from historic mass extinction events. And you should definitely cut back your calories to maybe 1,250 to 1,500 calories a day. And while scientists might estimate an impact winter that could be really long, they can't be positive. They could be wrong. It could end up actually, maybe it's not a 5-year winter. Maybe it's over in 2 winters, something like that.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened in the simulation. We had a scientist error. The asteroid that was expected to destroy most life and people on this planet turned out to be a comet, largely ice and not a solid metal asteroid.
Yeah. But even so, again, the vast majority of people are not going to do the kind of measures you see listed here. Most are going to starve to death in a long impact winter or a nuclear winter, which is the same basic mechanism there. And I think suicide is what a lot of people choose before the final days of starvation, which is a pretty unpleasant death. For a survival community like Fortitude Ranch, we regard asteroid strikes and supervolcano eruptions as the worst threats because we can farm and raise animals and survive other disasters. But if there's no sunlight, no way to produce food, it's just extremely difficult and far less pleasant try to make it for years.
But what would you do if the bug eating and other measures you outlined on this prior slide are not going to be enough? You can't even get 1,000 calories a day for everyone in your group, can you?
When you get to that situation, you face, a huge moral dilemma, and I'll briefly address that here. Fortitude Ranch, our ranch managers are trained on this topic, and the question basically boils down to this: do you want to try to convince a lot of people in the group that it's best for some to leave to save more food for others? And what makes this even a harder decision is the sooner you do this, the better to do it. So you're probably going to ask people, probably older adults, to leave so that the younger kids can have enough shelf-stable food to survive. And it's obviously best to do this fast. So after a few weeks, if it's clear, if there's reporting coming in, you can get over your ham radios that it's going to be a long impact winter or nuclear winter. What you'd want to do is get your group together, make the discussion, vote however you want to do it, and basically say, hey, we're going to pick, this set of adults, young adults, and then kids under 2018, whatever, the calories you've got works out to and the estimated length of the winter is, and then say, we're asking everyone else to leave.
So how would you pick the young adults?
Again, that's a difficult moral task and a lot of unpleasant ways to do this. My recommendation would probably be something like secret ballots and vote for 2 or 3 young adults to stay with all the kids. Maybe you pick age 18 or 20, depending on your population and food stockpiles. And we actually will take it a step further at Fortitude Ranch. We're going to recommend that the people we ask to leave, and in my case, I'd definitely be one of them. I'm on the older end. What I'm going to do is after I've left, if I do find some food, I'm going to bring it back. I hope I'll have the ethical standards to bring it back to help out the young folks survive. The other thing is not just they're younger and they've got their life ahead of them, but they're less responsible for getting us into the mess if there is a mess that causes it. And hopefully they can rebuild a better world.
Would you be holding resentments?
Well, I hope not. It'd be a tough thing to do, but in the situation, I would feel better if I knew I was doing the right thing. And what's the other point? I'm just going to sit there and we all die and starve to death. That's a big. Rather than everyone losing, it's better for some people to survive.
Definitely. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Here are the poll results. 65% of the people playing this collapse survival simulation said that they would take some time on this impact day to watch to see if SpaceX rocket would blast off or blow up. Most, 40%, wanted Musk and his SpaceX crew to succeed and get to Mars, though they'd likely just die there pretty quickly in this scenario.
I thought the Schadenfreude answer, I frankly hope they blow up, was pretty hilarious when I first saw that in the exercise message.
What is Schadenfreude?
Schadenfreude, it's a German word, and it basically means damaged pleasure, finding pleasure in other people's misfortune. And, the fact that hardly any people picked that answer, I want them to blow up 6%, tells you that we've got a pretty good, decent group of people playing the Collapse Survivor app.
That's fair. And I definitely feel like I need to put that in my lexicon.
Well, this SpaceX rush launch to Mars has a bit of humor in the simulation. I did think that the SpaceX mission of trying to keep our species alive by colonizing another planet, in case Earth does get destroyed, is a pretty noble mission.
Yeah, definitely. So wrapping up this post simulation podcast, as a reminder, don't just use the Survivor app for simulations and preparedness news. This app can save your life by sending real collapse threats to your cell phone. We issued one on H5N1 a few weeks ago, not as a take shelter alert, but as a warning that this virus continues to mutate, expanding into more mammalian populations. And despite the CDC's "Don't worry, be happy" assessment, it could become human to human contagious any day now, either through natural mutations or deliberate man-made changes, bioengineering. The difference between life and death with extra hours of warning could be huge. You never know how long it's going to take the government to warn everybody, news to warn people. It's not like it's in their best interest to do so. So make sure to download the app so that you can see possible threats hours, days, weeks before it becomes mainstream. So that concludes our coverage of this scenario. If you have some ideas for an interesting, realistic collapse scenario, please send them to us. If you got some ideas for a collapse survival situation preparedness or decisions to make, we should use them in a simulation. Please email those to us as well. And if you are a threat or survival expert and want to guest write a scenario or appear on our podcast, please contact us about it. And remember, you'll be emailed a short PDF report on lessons learned from this simulation tomorrow for those of you who played this live simulation last week. For those playing the simulation later from the archive scenarios or watching this podcast later, you'll find the lessons learned report in the Collapse Survivor website, collapsesurvivor.com. Until our next training exercise, I'm signing off.
And prepare for the worst, enjoy the present.